Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar to hear your views on our priorities and budget for the year ahead. So today we're going to cover three topics: our business plan and our priorities, our budget and what it means for the compensation, the practicing certificate fees, and the compensation fund contributions. You're probably familiar with how our webinars work, but just in case, we want this session to be as interactive as possible. We've already had some questions in advance and we will try and pick those up as we go through, but it'd be really great if we could get some live questions as well. So there's a link below the screen, so do click on that link and leave your questions. It'd be great if you could say who you are, but you can of course submit them anonymously. This stream will also be available on catch up, so will the slides and links to relevant resources, including of course the consultation. So feel free to share with colleagues. So first of all, just to introduce the speakers. So I'm Liz Rosser, I'm an Executive Director at the SRA, and my colleague Richard Silver is Policy Associate at the SRA. Okay, so on to our first slide, thanks. So our consultation, so we're consulting on the second year of our corporate strategy. So our corporate strategy from 2023 to 26, and the second year starts on the 1st of November this year. So it's 1st of November 24 to the 31st of October 25. And that's on our business plan and budget. And that's our second year of how we're delivering our corporate strategic priorities. So it builds on the priorities that we've started this year that we consulted on and published last year. So we'll go through each priority in a bit of detail in a minute, but just to sort of outline the key themes of each priorities. So the first one is around setting and maintaining high professional standards. The second is on risk-based and proactive approach to regulation. The third one on the development of legal tech and innovation. And the final one is around meeting the needs and the challenges of the users of legal services and the wider profession. Each of the priorities has EDI considerations and also steps to secure good access to justice built within it. And they all support our mission, which we launched last year, driving confidence and trust in legal services. As well as talking through our priorities, I'll also, as I said, talk about the budget and what it means for the practicing certificate and also our compensation fund. But first of all, we'd like to start by going through the 4 strategic priorities, and I'm going to hand over to Richard to take us through priority 1.
Thanks, Liz. So yes, the first strategic priority area that focuses on high standards of professional behaviour. There's a lot of content in there. It's quite rightly an area of focus that's very important to us, and I think that reflects in terms of the commitments that we make there and our proposals for 24-25. There's lots of, I guess, big ticket items that sit within that, and they very much represent the core of a lot of our sort of frontline regulatory work. And a lot of this is going to flow on into the third year of our current corporate strategy as well. So it's a very pivotal time, really. I'll just run through a few of the highlights that we've got there in terms of our proposals. The first, as Liz has already just mentioned there, our consumer protection review, certainly one of our largest ever projects here at the SRA, and central to our purpose and also all areas of work, really. There's a lot of content that we're looking at as part of that review. Just to briefly mention where we've got to at this point in the year, just ahead of moving on with our proposals for the next year. We have a discussion paper. It's still live currently, which we launched in February, and that's closing on the 1st of July. So if you are watching this webinar live, then you've still got time to respond or to take a look if you're interested in that. We've already engaged with many stakeholders actually to get to this point and to start thinking about where we should go in terms of the review and the areas of focus there. That's included over 170 people who we've spoken to through different channels, including roundtables, and includes members of the public and consumer groups as well as professionals. And we're going to be consulting in the autumn, actually, and a lot of the outcomes from that process will then inform our work in 2025. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later as well when we're looking at some of our other proposals around the compensation fund. So another area is for in-house solicitors. Some of you may know already, this is an increasing area of the sector. There's now more than 1/5 of the total practicing solicitor population who are working in-house. So that's over 34,000 people actually, and across some 6,000 organisations. So a really big and important area of focus for us. We're on a bit of a journey here. So in 2023, we undertook a thematic review of in-house practice, and in March 2024, so quite recently, we published some draft guidance and a package of support resources, which we're actively looking for views on actually at the moment for the in-house community. And we're going to be finalising those resources later on in 2024. Just worth briefly mentioning as well that there is other areas of focus that we've already taken and put in place already for in-house. This includes our annual in-house solicitor conference. So in March, our first one of those took place. You can still watch that conference on demand if you're interested on our website or through our YouTube channel. And there's plenty more to come. So as we move into 2025 in particular, we're going to be working to further strengthen our engagement with the in-house community, building on where we've got to so far and making sure that the right standards are in place in this really important area actually of the legal sector. So just moving further down, another area of focus for us under priority 1 is going to be exploring and responding to equality, diversity and inclusion issues. So our corporate strategy is rightly quite ambitious in this area. We've recently published our biennial diversity data about solicitors and other employees who are working in SRA regulated law firms. And we can see some year-on-year changes and improvements actually in our diversity data in terms of representation and experiences of people from different communities and backgrounds, but we know there is still a lot more to do. So just a couple of quick examples there. We know that the proportion of women who work in law firms has risen to 53% of the workforce, but women actually are less well represented at the most senior levels in some of the largest law firms. And we also know that there are significantly high proportions of lawyers from Black and Asian minority ethnic backgrounds working in very small one-partner law firms. But in our data, this proportion actually decreases as the law firm size increases. So we know that there is more for us to do here. So in 2025, yes, we're going to be progressing our work further on EDI. Our action plans that are coming out of our research findings in particular will be guiding that work. And a part of our focus will be on trying to encourage greater diversity at senior levels in law firms. We're also going to be taking forward plans to introduce an EDI evaluation framework, and that's going to really draw on a lot of the work today in terms of our improved data to make sure that we're heading in the right direction with that. And we're also going to be aligning with the Legal Services Board's proposed policy statement on EDI issues. So just moving further down, we're also going to be taking forward work, or we're certainly proposing to, around improvements and further improvements actually to our enforcement approach. So there are many different components there. Our use of financial penalties is just one of those, and some of you again might be familiar with this as something relatively new for us. So this summer we'll be consulting actually on some further changes for our financial penalties framework. And this will consider updating our fining guidance on a number of fronts, and this will include following the enactment of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act alongside other amendments as well. And the outcomes from that consultation will certainly inform where we then go to at the end of 2024 and into 2025. Just moving on to our next slide, and actually another area of our proposals is around the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, or the SQE. Obviously, education and entry points into the solicitor's profession are a really core focus, and certainly under this first priority area. So this includes making sure that the SQE is working as we expect it to, and that it can be recognised as valid, reliable and fair in terms of its assessments. And make sure that future generations of solicitors are meeting the standards of competence that actually are required of them and relied upon them by their clients. So proposals there for 2024-25 include delivering a 3-year since launch evaluation of the SQE and the impacts that it's having, And we're also going to be making the SQE available for candidates in the Welsh language from early 2025. Just moving down that list, and continuing competence is again quite rightly an important area of focus here. So this really is concerned with making sure that we secure good career-long competency requirements for solicitors. It's an essential area of focus for us to make sure that we meet our mission to drive confidence and trust in legal services. So work to date there has included publishing our action plan that responds to the Legal Services Board's continuing competence statement. And moving into 2024, or the back end, and 2025, we are going to be building further on this and delivering our commitments from an annual assessment that we undertake more generally of continuing competence. And then work going forwards will include training record reviews and also a thematic review that we'll look in at in terms of the approaches that solicitors use to meet their professional obligations here. There's also some proposals in our draft business plan around a new regulatory objective and anti-money laundering in particular. So one of the key aims within our current corporate strategy is providing credible and effective responses to anti-money laundering issues and more generally for economic crime. And our proposals for the end of 24 and into 2025 will see us continuing to strengthen and evolve this response in relation to new developments. So this will include the Legal Services Board's guidance around the new regulatory objective that will be going into the Legal Services Act to promote the prevention and detection of economic crime, but also more broadly to changes that are anticipated for money laundering regulations. And we're also keeping an eye on the Treasury's consultation on the future of anti-money laundering supervision. So it's quite right that we keep that very much front and centre to our work here and priority one. And just finally, another area of focus for us here is just going to be making sure that we're bringing improvements through into our caseworking. We've already made some good progress here to reduce the time that it's taking to investigate cases. Some investigations are very multifaceted and involve a great many lines of inquiry and evidence bundles that we have to give due course to and consider properly. But we've already managed to bring down timeframes for some of the complex casework that we have to undertake. But we know there's more to do here, so we will propose to focus further in on this during 2025.
Thanks very much, Richard. There's an awful lot there. That's really helpful. Thanks. So you mentioned the SQE 3-year review that we're doing next year, but we'd recently published the findings from our 2-year review, and I wondered if you could just say a little bit about what that found.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so just for brief background, so we use an independent reviewer, and they found that the SQE is actually continuing to perform well, and this means that there can be confidence in the rigor of the assessment process there. The reviewer noted improvements year on year, which again is really helpful and positive to see that. And they saw evidence also that the assessments were fair and reliable. There was one finding in particular I just wanted to flag, which is around apprentices who are continuing to perform comparatively well across both assessments as part of the SQE. This is especially the case actually in SQE2, which tests the legal skills as well as knowledge, and actually 97% of apprentice candidates passed SQE2 in April 2023, which compared to 75% of non-apprentice candidates. So some really interesting trends that we're seeing there. I just wanted to mention as well that we also reported some issues this year with results that were reported for January sitting of SQE1, and we are working very actively with Kaplan, the SQE's assessment provider, to fully review those issues and to make sure that we're confident that Kaplan has got the right assurance processes in place to avoid the risk of future errors.
Great, thanks very much. And in terms of EDI research, you talked a little bit about EDI research, and we've I think just last week actually published findings from a major piece of research. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. You're right, Liz. So at the start of June, actually, yeah, we did publish our research, which was conducted alongside the University of Exeter. And the focus there was exploring why minority ethnic students are more likely to have poorer outcomes compared to white candidates in legal professional assessments. So The research findings are indicating that there's no single reason to explain this, but yet multiple factors combined do seem to indicate the reasons behind some of those differences there. There was also evidence of socio-economic issues and important influences that we think we do need to consider a bit more. So this includes different experiences from school and university level that can impact students' ability to find a legal work placement, for example. In terms of where we go next with that research, it's available on our website alongside some commentary in terms of where we think we go next with this. We put a call out really to the legal education and training sectors to work with us actually in response to what we found and to try and tackle these issues. We think that it's important to all work together as far as possible in order to bring about change here. But we are also going to be developing an action plan which will be informed directly by those findings. And just briefly to mention that we're also expecting soon to publish the outcomes from research into overrepresented groups as well, which will help us to better understand why there's an overrepresentation of people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds in reports that are made to us and who are then subject to SRA investigations. So that's something else to keep an eye on as well.
Excellent, thank you. And yeah, obviously really important research there. So I would encourage people to take a look at the research published last week and look out for the other one coming later. Okay, thanks very much, Richard. So I'm going to move us on to the next slide, please, and that takes us on to priority 2. So priority 2, we will strengthen our risk-based and proactive regulation. So within this, we're going to be starting development work on a new data strategy for the SRA. So a data strategy will be really important and it will look to build our capability to turn our data and information into more focused insights. And through that, we'll be able to identify our risks and target our enforcement. And also it will help to inform our policy developments and we'll be able to use it to evaluate the impact of our actions. So some really important things we can take forward as we move that piece of work forward. We're also looking to strengthen our capacity for undertaking thematic reviews across different areas of the sector. This is something we've done for a while now. And this year, for example, it will include one on AML issues. We're going to be we're going to be looking at the proactive sanctions supervision. We'll be incorporating information received under our Memorandum of Understanding with OFSI, the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. And we're committed to working together in the public interest to promote best practice amongst law firms in relation to compliance with the UK sanctions regime. Obviously, really important work there. Okay.
Thanks, Liz. That's interesting actually. In terms of progress so far under this strategic priority, what's that looking like currently?
Yeah, I'd probably call out a few things there, Richard. So I think in terms of thematic, we've had some really interesting things coming out of our thematic reviews across the different aspects of the sector. So, for example, there's more on our website actually about a thematic review we did into law firms in the asylum services market, and that led to a warning notice. So again, there's lots. If you're involved in that area, it's well worth checking out the resources on that. And we cover lots of different areas, so do keep an eye out for future and look back at the past thematic reviews. In terms of data and data science, obviously it's everyone's talking about machine learning and AI and the capability of that. We've done a lot in this area, so we've enhanced our own data science capability and capacity. And we want to improve our view of risk through looking at machine learning, but also other analytical activities, so that we can actually really focus our insights and look into issues such as diversity in the legal profession. And then it's probably worth touching on the theme we've mentioned a couple of times, but our consumer protection review, which we've kicked off in earnest this year. And the initial stages of that, we've talked about a bit. We're looking at opportunities for SRA regulation to be increasingly proactive and responsive to changing risks in the legal services sector. We'll touch on it a bit later, and it'd be really good to get lots of input from people into that review. Okay, so I think we'll move on to priority 3 now. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Liz. So yes, priority 3. Actually, this touches nicely on Liz, on your comment that everybody's talking about AI. That is very much something that we're aware of here, and this reflects actually in terms of some of our proposals for 2024-25. So under this third area of our strategic corporate priorities, we want to try to keep pace really with an ever-changing landscape, while also keeping an eye on future challenges that will be coming down the road, and that we need to either set a view on or have a position on as well. We've made good progress on a number of fronts already, and I'll mention a little bit around that shortly as we go through. But in particular, we're really interested in understanding how technology and innovation can build better experiences for members of the public when they need to use legal services or are trying to find help with a legal situation. Just running through some of those proposed areas then. So yeah, AI is very much front and center here. So we're going to be looking to develop further our regulatory approach to artificial intelligence. It is evolving quickly. It's in many areas of our daily lives already. And our risk outlook report from November last year actually found that 3/4 of the largest solicitors firms are already using AI. And that's nearly twice the number from just 3 years ago, actually. So we're seeing big changes here. And over a third of small firms are actually also exploring the potential here. So clear opportunities with AI, but we know that that also brings risks and challenges and barriers also for some firms. So we need to make sure that there is clarity and that law firms can understand the safe and appropriate use of AI in their services, but also that consumer safeguards aren't sacrificed along the way. So we're proposing to build on the resources that we've already published around AI. And this will make sure that our regulation is accommodating and responding to the challenges of AI in all of its forms and all of its forms to come. We're also going to be looking to do more with small firms and their take up and access to technology. So we know that small firms, for all sorts of reasons, can find it challenging to explore and consider adopting new technology in their workplaces in the same way that larger firms are able to. We're commissioning research that will help us to better understand the needs of small firms in adopting technology, and also so that we can, I think, have a clear understanding in terms of where we come into these types of conversations to support small firms actually. So in our next business plan year, we're proposing to use those insights to develop a full work programme that will be focused on just that. I'll mention also our Regulators Pioneer Fund and our progress, including the outcomes from our current project to increase the use of technology-enabled dispute resolution. So we've made successful bids to the government's Regulators Pioneer Fund in recent years, which is sponsored by the Better Regulation Executive. And we're really pleased in December 2022 to hear that we were awarded a new grant from the fund for our latest project. And it is exploring approaches to increase the use of technology in dispute resolution, really with a view to helping individuals and businesses to resolve legal issues without needs to go to court. So as we move into 2025, we'll be progressing some of the outcomes from that process actually. And more generally, we're going to look to work to keep pace and also to consider future challenges through some of our horizon scanning work. Technology moves faster than ever, so we do need to make sure that we're actively looking ahead to those future developments and emerging innovative practices. So not just within the legal services world, but also more broadly in the wider world.
Thanks, Richard. So as you've sort of alluded, really, this priority really is a continuation of our previous corporate strategy. We had a priority there about innovation and tech. You've talked about some of the things which we'd already started, like the Regulators Pioneer Fund, but I wonder also if there's anything else you wanted to call out over the last few years that we've done, because we certainly ramped up work in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. It's a continuation. So this, in terms of where we're aiming to go to and where we're proposing to focus in on, it is building on some really strong groundwork actually. It's probably just worth mentioning two of the the previous rounds of bidding from the Regulators Pioneer Fund and the legacies from that process, actually. So our first was a programme that awarded grants of up to £500,000 to early stage developers of digital technology solutions that were aiming to provide help to individuals and small businesses to understand and resolve legal problems. So that process has been delivered, and we've recently reviewed and published some information in terms of what some of those winners of that process have now done with that money and the solutions that they've introduced into the market. And then the second was a project that was helping us to understand and map legal service provision actually in 2 regions of England and Wales, and really to help understand where those gaps are and what action might be taken to try to help alleviate them. It's also worth a bit of a shout out to our SRA Innovate programme. This offers practical opportunities for firms of all sizes actually, and law tech providers to, I guess, road test new and emerging technologies with us, but in controlled ways. And we also hit the road to visit different parts of England and Wales and to connect with local law firms and law tech providers to explore challenges and opportunities. It's worth mentioning actually that we've got an event coming up very shortly on 19th of June at the National Space Centre in Leicester, which is called Technology and AI Practical Challenges and Opportunities. So again, if anybody is watching this live, there is still time to take a look at that on our website. And I think that includes an opportunity to meet yourself, Liz, and members of our senior team as an extra selling point there. And it's also good just to mention our Law Tech Insight newsletter, which that is now into its 3rd edition. They're all available on our website, and they feature sort of the latest news and opinions from our perspective, and also from guest speakers as well on technology in the legal sector and beyond as well. So those things are all available on our website.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, do join us in Leicester. It's going to be a really good event. Really looking forward to that. Thanks very much, Richard. So I'm going to now take us on to our final priority in our business plan and corporate strategy, which is we will be an authoritative and inclusive organisation meeting the needs of the public, consumers, those we regulate, and our staff. So as a regulator, we need to understand that actually our definition of customer needs to be broad and include anyone who interacts with us. So we've got quite a few plans in this area. We want to extend our customer service plans and model into more operational areas. It's really important that we get feedback from the customer and we use that to improve the service that we're delivering. And so we're going to extend that into our client protection team, amongst others. Now, this is a team that deals with interventions and compensation fund claims. So lots of interactions with the profession and the public there. So it'd be great to get some more customer feedback there. We want to grow and embed a continuous improvement culture. We've made good progress starting that in this corporate strategy, and we want to grow this further next year. And we also want to progress our communications review to build on our perceptions profiling work. So again, an important place to get feedback from our stakeholders and to benchmark our positions so that we can understand the impact of our communications and our impact over the course of the 3-year strategy. Diversity in SRA leadership, obviously really important, and we want to continue to progress and evaluate our actions to increase diversity in our leadership and to close ethnicity and gender pay gaps. So we obviously publish our gender pay gap, which is a legal requirement, but we also voluntarily publish our ethnicity pay gap. That's because we believe that it's important that we and others in the legal sector publish this to support and drive ongoing change and progress in this area. We are making progress ourselves internally, but there's always more we can do, and we're looking forward to improving both those gaps in the future. And then in terms of ESG, we'll continue to deliver our internal environmental, social and governance commitments and work with key stakeholders on reducing our environmental impact.
Thanks, Liz. So that sort of overarching vision for our own leadership, our own sort of internal approach to improving EDI where do you think that translates in terms of the legal sector and sort of our vision there? What are our expectations there?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on EDI quite a lot, haven't we, throughout this, and there's some important work we're doing across all our priorities contributing to that. I think, yes, we want to be acknowledged internally. We want to be acknowledged for our own inclusivity, but also we do want, and it is set out in our corporate strategy, that members of the public and the legal profession will see proportionate and effective approaches in place across our regulatory framework towards diversity. So as I said, you know, in publishing our ethnicity pay gap, for example, that is something where we're taking a leadership role and we want to see others doing the same. We've also talked about SQE, and as that continues to embed, we hope to see a profession where there's wider access for the most talented from all backgrounds. And you talked about apprentices earlier, and we're watching with interest how that develops over the coming years. And of course, we talked earlier, and you touched on it, the greater diversity in senior roles, particularly in large law firms, is something that we've got a close eye on as well. Okay, so I think that's probably it from on the priorities within the business plan, but I would just use this opportunity to remind you to submit questions. We've had one or two during this, but as I say, we're picking up some questions from earlier, but please do drop your questions in now. And then I'm going to talk a little bit now about the other bits of it, which is more around the money. So thank you, thanks. So as we've mentioned, we're also consulting on our budget for the second year of the strategy, and that's our budget from the 1st of November until next October, the end of October. So a reminder that the practicing certificate fee is actually made up of many parts. So there's the part for the SRA for the regulation, and a part for the Law Society. And then there are also smaller contributions to various levies, including the Legal Services Board and others. So the two largest parts are for the SRA and the Law Society, and we both consult separately on that. So the Law Society has run their consultation, and this is our consultation on the practicing certificate fees. But what we do then is combine where we end up, and that will give you the total PC fee. But what I can say is that our proportion of the practicing certificate fee will be unchanged. Just to explain that and what we're proposing here. So we're proposing £162 for individual practicing certificate fee, which is the same as last year. So when we set our corporate strategy, which started in the current year, we committed that income from practicing certificates would be increased by no more than inflation plus 2%. What we've done is we worked really hard in setting the budget next year to actually limit it to inflation for next year. Now, with the increased solicitor numbers and a limit to inflation, that actually allows us to keep the individual practicing certificate fee constant at £162. So that's the practicing certificate fee. And then if we can move on to the next slide, please, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the compensation fund. So in terms of the compensation fund, I think as I'm sure most listeners will be aware, we've had exceptional levels of intervention costs and compensation fund claims over the last year or two, and a big increase from previous. And so what that means is that it's brought the reserves of the fund down, and we do need to increase the compensation fund contributions this year. This is the first increase in 5 years, so the levels that we're talking about have been coming down since 2018-19, but we are needing to increase this year. Now, when we set the compensation fund contribution, we work to some principles, and those principles are published and are linked within the consultation. The overriding principle, and the most important one, is to maintain the viability of the fund. But also there's a principle around manageability of contributions. So we do try to keep them as manageable as possible, ensuring the viability of the fund. And so what we've done is we've taken some steps to try to keep the rises in contributions to the minimum that we need. And what we've done is we've looked very closely at our budget and some real tight budgetary control of our costs. And we've done lots of modelling of potential scenarios. And we've also negotiated a banking facility should we get a large intervention that necessitates that. We've made a commitment as well to rebuild the reserves of the compensation fund over 2 to 3 years rather than in one big hit. So through doing all that, it has allowed us to not go quite as high as we initially thought in terms of the compensation fund contributions. And what we're proposing is the individual compensation fund contribution will be £90, which is the same level as 2018-19, and the firm fee will be 2,220. So that's where we are. As I say, we've taken steps to try and keep those down as low as possible, but we do need to replenish the reserves on the fund. So recognise that it won't be welcome, but we do need to increase contributions this year.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so we've had a few comments coming through actually about that increase, and actually some interest in terms of the split and how that works between firms and individuals, but also in particular with smaller and large law firms. Is there anything we could say around that?
Yeah, so how we collect the contribution is that we collect 50% of the income from firms and 50% from individuals. Now, that split's been in place for some time, and I think what's happened over that time is the number of firms has reduced and the number of individuals has gone up. So what that means is that the firm contribution has gone above the 2018-19 level. And we do know that speaking to smaller firms, they do feel that it can feel disproportionate. I mean, I would say that the larger firms do pay the contribution for their individual solicitors. So say you had a firm of 1,000 solicitors, their firm, they would actually be paying 92,000. So but we do recognise that we can't change the 50-50 split this year, but as we've touched on earlier, we've got the consumer protection review, and I think that absolutely is an opportunity to look at that, and indeed to look much more widely at the compensation fund, how it works, who can claim, how we apportion costs, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot we can look at in the future, but do recognise for the next year we are stuck with that 50-50 split.
Thanks, Liz. And so we've had a question come in actually around in-house solicitors. So as we mentioned earlier, this is now a significant area of the regulated community. Is there a reduction at all in terms of compensation fund contributions for solicitors who are working in-house?
No, I'm afraid there isn't. The individual fee is for all individuals with practicing certificates, except those working for the CPS. So in-house solicitors are covered by that, and there isn't a reduction. Again, that could be something that we could consider as part of the consumer protection review, you know, so do get involved and give feedback on that. But currently it is borne by all individuals.
Great, thanks, Liz. I think, and we've obviously we've mentioned the consumer protection review and how we're expecting in any event we're going to be able to look at some of these issues going forward. So that's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the consumer protection review, as we've touched on, is wide. It's not just looking at the compensation fund, it's looking at issues such as firms holding client money, how we identify and monitor risk, any checks and balances in terms of mergers and acquisitions. And indeed, we did have a question, a question around solicitors not holding money and whether that suggests and gives the impression that solicitors cannot be trusted. Well, I think what we'd say to that is it's very early days. There are no decisions. We just want everything on the table to be discussed. And we really just want to hear your views about the pros and cons of all the options. But you know, the potential benefits of firms not holding client money around reduced bureaucracy, etc., is something that is on the table, but certainly no decisions have been made. Very early days. As you said, Richard, we've now spoken to, I think it's over 170 people. And one thing that did come out, and that is coming out very strongly, is that the profession does support the principle of the compensation fund, that principle that the profession should pay collectively to ensure there's no consumer loss due to dishonesty. That, of course, is really important in terms of the reputation of the profession. So that is something that we're getting out, coming out at the moment. But again, we're really keen to hear views as we move forward with this review. I'm conscious of the time, so I'd just like to take us on now to the final slide, if I may. So just really to encourage you to respond to the consultation. So the money part of it closes earlier. That closes on the 24th of June, because we do need to, as I said, combine the practicing certificate fee with the Law Society fee, and then take the whole contribution through to the LSB for approval. So that does close earlier, but the business plan itself is open till the 2nd of July. So do please, we'd really appreciate your comments on this. So I'm conscious of time. We maybe have time for a couple more questions. I did pick up the one that's come in during, but I see there's a couple more pre-submitted questions. So Richard, maybe we could just take one or two of those. So you touched earlier on ECTA, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, which came into force in October. And I wondered if you could just outline a little bit, I know it's early days, but what it means for us and for the powers of the SRA.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you're right. The powers are sort of very recently arriving with us, and the cases where we think we're going to need to apply them, that's very much something that we'll need to work through, and we have that in our sights certainly to do that. So we're going to be consulting actually very shortly, more generally, on our approach in this area, and this will be part of what we consult on and we look at. So there will be opportunities for us to actually have that discussion with the legal services sector around our use of those powers. And in the meantime, we're going to be developing guidance in any event to try to give some practical steers in terms of how we might actually end up using them. But it's relatively recent for us, so that's a process that we will be working through over the coming months.
Lovely. Thanks, Richard. Now, I'm really conscious of time, so I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank everyone for your attention, and particular thank you to Richard. If you do have any more questions, do let us know, and anything that we haven't covered, we'll try to pick up in future comms and in future webinars. We really hope that you found this useful. So 2 things to ask of you, please. The first is that we'd like your feedback on the webinar. You can do this through clicking through the feedback link at the end, because it's really important. It helps us just to improve and to think about how we communicate with you in the future. And of course, please do respond to our consultation. You've seen the dates, and it'd be really good to get your input into the consultation. So until then, thanks very much again for your attention, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.